Innovation Center and the NLG and Technology Task Force. Sorry, I'm moving a little too fast here. Today we have the pleasure of addressing using game-based learning to educate children and affected by crisis and conflict. And we have a host of organizations with us today and speakers that I will let the host introduce in a few minutes. But before we get underway, I'm going to go over our regular housekeeping rules. Encourage everyone to stay muted to minimize background noise, and we do need to want to make this as interactive as possible. So please open the chat window in WebEx and line up your questions or comments there, and we will facilitate a discussion and a Q&A session towards the end of the hour. We also will ask you to respond to a short webinar satisfaction poll, and you should be looking for that link in the chat window as well. And that'll take place later 2 or 3 minutes before we finish up. We are recording this today, and we will be sharing both the recording and the slides and potentially a question and answer document and other information, links to interesting web sites and resources. And so look for all of that in a follow-up email later on today or tomorrow. Without any further ado, I will turn this over to Leila and Peter, who's going to be giving a little bit of context and provide introductions to the rest of the speakers.
Fantastic. Leila? Thank you so much, Frederick. So on behalf of the NLG Tech Task Force, welcome to our last webinar of 2017. And thank you for joining us both this morning and also over the past 9 months. I'm actually thrilled to be co-hosting this webinar with Peter Transberg from INEE, and I'll hand it over to Peter for just a quick introduction.
Thanks much, Leila. INEE is definitely pleased to co-host the webinar with the NLG Tech Task Force. And the topic and program highlighted today, Can't Wait to Learn, is an excellent example of work that's being done to ensure quality, safe, and relevant education for people who are affected by crisis and conflict, which is exactly the mission of INEE. The Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies, for those that don't know, which is referred to as INEE, is an open global network of partners and members working together to ensure that everyone has the right to education, even in emergencies. Today's co-hosting is done actually through the INEE Technology and Education Crises Task Team, so we call that the Tech TT, which is a global group of experts focused on the use of technology to enhance education, particularly in crisis contexts. And the Tech TT exists to help maintain the overall ICT for education and emergencies landscape and to share knowledge and information about what is working and what isn't working. And in this regard, I'm really happy to let you know that the task team is currently developing a dynamic ICT inventory database set for launch early next year, which will showcase technology, tools, and projects that are or could be used to deliver education in emergencies. And the Can't Wait to Learn program that we'll hear about today is a really great example of what will be included in that ICT inventory. Anyway, I encourage you to find out more about the Tech Task Team and to join the INEE network. It's free at our website, which is ineesite.org. So thanks again and enjoy the webinar.
Great, thank you, Peter. We'll make sure also to showcase the ICT database as soon as it's ready for sharing. So watch for the NLG Tech Task Force invites on that topic. So just clicking to the next slide, as this is something that we tend to actually show on every webinar as we have new members. As a quick reminder, the task force is really focusing on connecting experts in humanitarian response, so global and local NGOs, with the private sector expertise and resources to address the needs of displaced children and youth. And we're doing that through these information exchanges like the webinars, our website, and also project-based collaborations, which we'll talk more about in 2018. There are a number, if I just click to the next slide, there are, I would say, three things or three actions you can take today if you haven't already done so. One is sign up for the task force to receive future communications and invitations. Review the recordings of past webinars. We've actually refreshed and redesigned our solution center, so you will notice that it looks slightly different, and hopefully it is easy for you to navigate and find all the information you're looking for. And do let us know, as we're planning for 2018, what you'd like to hear about. Just to give you a preview, we're looking to feature Skype in the classroom and how teachers in places like Kakuma or Jordan and Egypt are using Skype in the classroom. World Readers work in Jordan, and then also NRC's work with one of the academic institutions here in the U.S. So a lot more coming. Do make sure to sign up in order to get the invitations. And then the last call to action for you is, since the time is running out, to register for the NLG Tech Summit in Amman. As a reminder, this specific summit is focusing on one of the NLG pillars, and that's youth and adolescents, and 4 challenges that youth and adolescents in the region face, including around education, employment, participation, and protection. You'll see on this slide there are a number of ways to participate as an attendee, as an exhibitor, especially if you have really interesting technology solutions and partnerships you'd like to showcase, as a speaker, keynote speaker, or session speaker, as a sponsor. This event is currently sponsored by World Vision and NetHope, and also as a mentor to young people who will be also attending the summit. So now moving to actually the feature of this webinar today. It is Can't Wait to Learn program. I'm very excited about this program, as it's really showcasing how game-based learning can be used in education, and specifically to educate children affected by crisis and conflict. We have a number of speakers. I will actually introduce the first speaker, who will be the MC for the next 30-35 minutes. And in the meantime, do make sure to ask questions in the chat window. So I'll hand it over to Kate Radford, who is the program director for Can't Wait to Learn. Over to you, Kate, and welcome.
Okay, thank you very much for having us all today, and thank you everybody for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us. We have a really nice selection of speakers today. We're going to focus on both Lebanon and Sudan, but we'll also talk about Jordan and Uganda, where we're also working on Can't Wait to Learn. So just to give you a little bit of background, we are a program which really comes out of a very strong need to address some of the chronic problems that we're finding at the moment with very large numbers of children out of school. Particularly, we're focusing on the 22 million primary school aged children who are out of school due to conflict. And as most of the people, I've had a little look at the list, as most of the people on this call know, there's many challenges affecting the ability to provide quality education in conflict-affected regions. A lack of existing infrastructure, host countries who are under stress and have limited capacity, who are dealing with a very, very high refugee caseload, different language of instructions for some refugees as they come into a country where they don't speak the language, but they're forced to learn in that language, and children who have missed years of school and need to catch up so that they can join more traditional education opportunities. And this is where we come in with Can't Wait to Learn, which is a program that started in Sudan, and a little later on the call, UNICEF Tilal will be telling us a little bit more about how we started in Sudan. Firstly, I think it's very important to know that it is a technology program. It's a technology program that uses curriculum-based gaming, so it develops games based on curriculum. Working with the Ministry of Education is very, very strongly focused on evidence gathering, uses a partnership approach, and we're currently scaling. We are looking at, can we actually adapt the Can't Wait to Learn approach that we successfully trialed in Sudan to other contexts, namely Uganda, and in the case of the No Lost Generation countries, both Jordan and Lebanon. So we're looking forward to telling you a little bit more about that. For all people who always want to know numbers, we've set ourselves the rather ambitious target of reaching 170,000 children by 2020. It's a drop in the ocean of the large numbers, but we also hope that not only will we be able to use Can't Wait to Learn as War Child, but so will our partners, but also that other potential programs will learn from our experience and maybe start something else of their own. So that's where we're coming from. Just to quickly zoom in on the game, it's very much designed by technical experts. It's always in collaboration with the Ministry of Education. Sometimes means it takes a little bit longer to be able to start, but it's very, very important for us to do that both from a leadership perspective for the ministry in country, but also from a scale-up perspective. We're always looking at self-paced learning, so children can learn at their own pace. They are directed through a curriculum, though. And what we like to do is always to have our learners logged, and we can follow their progress. And there's a management portal, which is basically the hub where all information about child's playing comes to. And I think what's very important to note is we always adapt the delivery model for context. So you see here children in Sudan sitting under the solar panels, but in Jordan, for example, we work with formal schools rather than the informal sector, and we always work with strong local partners. So you'll hear a little bit later from Massa, who's the director of Sombola in Lebanon, and she'll tell you a little bit about how she and her organization is working with Can't Wait to Learn. Just quickly, while we have some room, we have a huge range of supporters, and we're very lucky in that. One also that we do need to mention that is not included here is also USAID, who's very much supporting us on the applied research in Lebanon and Jordan, and IKEA Foundation and Google.org and the Dutch National Postcard Lottery are our largest financial supporters as well as providing a lot of technical and lobbying support. And here's just a small range of our international partners. You can see in the bottom row the Ministries of Education in Sudan, Jordan, and Lebanon, but also UNICEF, War Child itself, TNO, which is a research institute, Butterfly Works, and Ahfad University for Women, who Tilal will tell you a little bit about later. Now, I'm going to hand you over to Nisreen Ibrahim, and she is the Program Manager in Lebanon for Can't Wait to Learn.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be on this webinar talking about Can't Wait to Learn in Lebanon. This is actually a picture of the children playing the game at the Sumbula Center in Bekaa, which Masa will talk about after me. So a little bit about some of the education context in Lebanon. Since the Syrian crisis, a lot of refugee influx into the country increased the demands on an education system, especially the public education system that's already struggling even before the crisis. 50% of the students enrolled in public schools are non-Lebanese. Around 200,000 children were enrolled in the formal public education system last year during the last academic year, but the target was 400,000. Up until now, 59% of school-age refugee children are still out of the formal education system. Since the crisis started, the government of Lebanon has been working with the UN and the local and international NGOs to cope with the crisis and the amount of children who need to go into school. In November 2013, the Ministry of Education in Lebanon opened a second shift school because the schools in Lebanon couldn't handle the amount of the children that need to go into the public education system. In this current academic year, we have around 350 schools currently running the double shift schools, and every municipality in every area in Lebanon, once they submit to the ministry that they need more second shift schools, the Ministry of Education supports that. Even with that initiative, there's still challenges, and there's a lot of reasons why children are still out of school in the country. Access to school is sometimes difficult because of the school is too far away, economic reasons, child labor plays a big role, especially in agricultural areas. And there's the issue of coping with a different curriculum because the children in Syria are used to learning everything in Arabic, while in Lebanon, for example, subjects like math and science are taught in the second language, which is English or French. A little bit about how War Child, through Can't Wait to Learn, is collaborating with the Ministry of Education and Higher Education. We got approval to pilot the program as part of the ministry's Basic Literacy and Numeracy program, which is for out-of-school children who are 10 to 14 years old. And as requested by the ministry as well, so which is based, of course, on the national Lebanese curriculum. We're also developing the BLN curriculum and the more traditional paper and pencil one, not just the gamified one, in Arabic, French, and English. How Can't Wait to Learn is implemented in Lebanon. War Child is an organization that's based on scale, and to do that, we have a range of partnerships with local NGOs, international NGOs, small CBOs, and even we have one municipality in Akkar in the far north where we even partnered with. These partnerships are based basically on the needs in the field, and where the partner is strong in outreach for children, out-of-school children that fit the criteria as set by the ministry. Sumbula, here the logo of Sumbula is there, which is in Bika, where most of the out-of-school children are, and I'll let Masa talk more about the work of Sumbula in implementing Can't Wait to Learn. This is some of the things that children said about Can't Wait to Learn after being implemented. We started implementation in Lebanon in mid-October. They mostly love the game. They say it's a fun game to learn. They're learning math through gaming. They've learned math before, but this is the first time they learn it through a game on a tablet, so they love it very much. And even one of our partners in Shatila camp told us that two things, that the children want to play it for more than 45 minutes, which was really nice to hear. And second, some of them are waiting in line before the session to start because they're so excited to go into the center and start playing the game. This is a screenshot of the game from the Sudan game. It looks differently, of course, in Lebanon and Jordan because it's based on the culture in Sudan. And this is what we call the game world. In the game world, the child will collect stars. If you can see the stars next to the girl. So the more they play, the more they win what we call the mini games. That, for example, they're adding. Once they learn how to add and they win, they have a star. And the more stars they collect, the community or the world will be built. So it encourages them to keep playing and building. This is one of the mini games. It's a number 9. And here the question is 23 greater or smaller than 26? So there's lots of mini games within that would help the child build their game world. And this is another section of the game world of the Sudan game where the child is builds the hut and becomes a herder. So they give them that aspiration to the future of learning and what it can do. So I'll hand it over to Masa now, sorry, one more slide for me. So coming soon in Lebanon is the Arabic language game. It will help children learn how to read in Arabic. And as you can see, it's very, the look and feel of the game is very different than the Sudan game, which makes it more contextualized for the children. A bit about the timeline and expected results. For Lebanon, our target now is 1,500 children. In 2018, when we add the language game, we hope to get to 2,000 children. And our plans to scale up between 2019 to 2020 is to get more partners on board, scale to new areas in Lebanon where we're not implementing now, and to get to 35,000 children by 2020, and of course to do more trainings and outreach and support the implementing partners in these plans so we can expand to new areas and reach more children to help them bridge, of course, to formal schooling.
Thank you, Ms. Reem. I'd like to introduce Massa, who's traveled through a lot of snow to get to the webinar today. So thank you. And this is Massa, the director from Sombola.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on this webinar. It's a pleasure to be with you. So I'm a co-founder of Sombola NGO. The official name of Sombola is Sombola Group for Education and Development. Sombola is a grassroots NGO that is basically born from the conflicts of crisis. However, we're not trying to be another redundant NGO. Our model is very much like a niche model, trying to prototype and trying to focus on innovative and quality-based solutions that are also sustainable. And that's why Can't Wait to Learn and this program comes at a very timely base here, because this is exactly what we try to focus on, is what would work best with children in order to accelerate the learning, in order to improve the quality, and to ensure that children remain committed to education. So this is exactly what we try to do in our approach. How the program Can't Wait to Learn is implemented at Sombola Learning Center. We're based in Bekaa. We have a big center. So we address our target group are children who are out of school. As Kate mentioned and Nasreen, this is in alignment with the Ministry of Education's what they call the BLN program, the Basic Literacy and Numeracy. So this is addressing out of school children or those who have never been into school, or the ones who have dropped out of school. And the dropping rate is actually only increasing. So this is very important to address as well. Now, they are equally boys and girls, specifically from the Syrian refugee communities and Lebanese vulnerable children who are also dropping out from school. The age group is 10 to 14. And in Sombola, we're covering now 110 children at a pilot level, divided into 4 groups. So the way we're operating this within Sombola is basically we are designing this program in alignment. Well, we're implementing, of course, the program in alignment with the ministry, as I said, to make sure that eventually these children get enough basic literacy and numeracy to be able to join eventually formal education. That's the ultimate goal. And that's exactly what Sombola tries to achieve. And by delivering the Can't Wait to Learn program, which does not require a formal education at this point setting, all it requires a friendly, friendly space, a child-friendly space, and facilitators who are trained to basically conduct and operate the program. And that's exactly what we are offering. We have a center that is extremely appealing for children. It's all drawn on the walls by children with murals and stuff. They have great access to, it's very close to their community and to where they live. So, and basically we trained other facilitators to implement the program with those 110 children. So basically, it's also run in 2 shifts or in 2 sessions. It's divided. Children have 45 minutes as a playtime to work on the program, and we have 2 consecutive sessions from running from 2 to 3 and then from 3 to 4. So this is how we cover the 110 students over 5 days a week. So how the children are learning through the game, through what we have observed so far. So children really move up through different game levels by playing, as Nisreen said, the mini games. And the children are guided within the program during the game through pre-recorded videos of real and animated teachers. So that's very much engaging. They are also provided with immediate feedback on whether their answers are correct or not, and so that they keep on going back to previous activities whenever they want or feel that they have to reconfirm their learning. Again, and by having each child a private account and his own tablet, children are learning at their own pace. And again, this is very important because we're trying to address learning and not only schooling. And this is something that is very beneficial with the program, because what we want to observe whether the children are in fact learning or not. And this is another advantage of this, is the differentiated learning. So by having their own pace, basically we're addressing the different level or the sub-level of the children. The educational is also programmed. The educational games start at the basic level. So it starts from the simplest to the most complex. And children, when they cover all the exercises, they are automatically allowed to reach to reach the higher level exercises in order to continue growing or continue to learning with a higher level. And by the end of all these programs, the children, what they really gather is not only the content, but they also acquire a set of skills and competencies, which is also the added value of the technology-based and the game-based learning. Now, what we have learned so far, and we started really piloting the program only starting October. So far, it's truly hard to assess whether they are definitely learning or to assess more specifically the learning impact per se. But what we are observing, and we have the same testimonies that Nisreen has shared, the children are extremely engaged and motivated, excited to learn through this modality and through the based game model. So this is in a way will help us address the challenges that I'm going to be talking about by having this commitment and this motivation with the children. They also enjoy the theme of the game, which is the profession, and the building of each profession as they move through the game. Now, the challenges that we are facing as an NGO are common to all programs, and the game, the Can't Wait to Learn, is not an exception. So basically, it's very important to highlight that these are really generic challenges that we have to put into context. So, for example, the special needs children, it's quite challenging to address them in a classroom. This applies whether we have technology or we don't, and this is something that we need to always keep in mind. The other thing is that the children who are at a very high risk to drop out are basically forced to enroll or to engage in child labor due to the socioeconomic challenges of those families, either the refugees or the very underprivileged and vulnerable families. So this is the dropping out and the child labor, and I would even add the early marriage among the girls. Is truly a big challenge that we have to address. Now, finally, due to some cultural context here as well, we need to say that sometimes boys can be challenging or a source of challenge for the female facilitators in the classroom. But overall, I would like to highlight that this game has been attracting within the community in Bekaa a lot of interest, and we look forward to scaling this program because it is addressing the quality issue. It is engaging the children at a very focused level, and we look forward to see how we can scale it and make it more workable.
Thank you, Masa. And I think it's great in Lebanon, where we're focusing on the informal education system, that we're really able to engage with such fantastic local partners such as Sambola. So thank you very much. We're now going to move to Sudan, and I'm going to welcome Tilal Salih, who some of you know, where we actually work with UNICEF Sudan. This is obviously a very different type of partner, but where UNICEF is very well placed for us in Sudan is that they have very good access, very good humanitarian access in a context where that is not always easy. And also UNICEF has been our partner in learning Sudan for many years. I can hear Tilal in the background, so he's eager to start. So I hand it over to you, Tilal.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Sudan. I will start with a little bit background to the context of Sudan. Sudan as a country have 4 million out of school age children, 6 to 13, which make it the highest in the Middle East region. And mostly all of those out of children are almost 80% in rural areas, nomadic children, girls also high drop out of school. And out of those 4 million, 1.8 are out of school because of conflict. One of the other issues in Sudan, because of lack of access, most of the children who go to the first grade, they don't go as a grade 6, but they go at grade 7 or 8 or 9. In terms of the government spend 1.5 of the GDP in education, which is the lowest, already low region in terms of spend in education. And if we look at that need, if we look at traditional education response, we probably need around $500 million to send our kids to school. Additional to that, and because of the well-known issues and the conflict in South Sudan, Sudan have received in the last 3 years around 400 South Sudanese refugees school-age children in 6 states. So for us to address this issue, we came with the usual response. So UNICEF have worked in a close collaboration with the Education Institute in the country, and we developed what we call the alternative learning program. It's an idea that there is already a lot of school, all the school out of the school. So what we did, we created a curriculum, a catch-up curriculum, which in the first cycle can target children aged 7 to 9. They can go to the school or this alternative learning program for 1 year, and then they can catch up to grade 4 to the normal education system. But what if the children are more old? If they are 10, 12, 13, we develop 2 cycles of the program where they go for the first year, cycle 1, the second year, and the third year they go for cycle 2, and then they can sit to take the basic school exam. They can either from there enter secondary education or go to the vocational education. The project was very successful. It's one of our flagship programs, and the last 4 years we managed to enroll successfully around 500,000 children. But still, the need is huge. In terms of statistics, there is more children out of school than children getting in school in Sudan. The population are growing, and the government spend is not increasing. So we need an innovative solution to this problem. And that's why this is why Can't Wait to Learn was the solution for us. I don't want to talk a lot about the game. My colleague have explained the game, but in Sudan, we are using the e-learning designing model to work and provide access to education to the most vulnerable, the nomadic, the former child soldier, children in remote areas, girls, street children. And the technology of the game is already being trialed in Sudan. Just a little bit of how it's being trialed. The project in Sudan, the idea of Can't Wait to Learn, started in 2014 in a partnership between one of our leading universities in the country, Rothschild Holland and UNICEF. We introduced the mathematical curriculum in 19 villages in different states in our country, targeting 589. And the initial result of the numeric trial was really successful. The learning outcome was quite high comparing to children went through the normal education. So we saw there is enough evidence in the mathematics that this could work and it could be effective. We added the Arabic literacy. It's being developed and now being tested in Sudan. And by May 2018, we will finish from the component of the literacy part of it. Based on that, we are going to move to the journey of a scale. Our plan on 3 levels. First level, we want to look at it from a systematical approach. If you want to have a sustainability project, this project have to be part of the education, of the Ministry of Education normal system. So this will be our first priority, that we develop the e-learning in a way to be accredited programs that if children can finish from the games and finish from learning, they can get an acceptable credited certificates. From 2018 to 2020, we want to target 4 different types of communities and test the piloting of the scale-up, if we can call it. The first is emergency effective children. As I said, we have 1.8 million. So we will target 25,000 refugees, detainees, IDPs in the country, and using the game to provide access to education for out of school. Also, we like to look at rural development and access to rural education. So we'll target 25,000 children from the most vulnerable rural community in the country. And this is, I think, doable. The other interesting part, Sudan have almost 1 million nomadic children, and our nomadic education is really not running well in the country. So we want to prove a concept note and expand and see if the e-learning itself can be used to support nomadic education. And our idea in the next 3 years, we'll target around 10,000 nomadic children and see what is the learning outcome, can they benefit from the program. Again, we want to use the e-learning as a way to access areas where there is a difficult access to girl education. This is a very unique problem to Sudan, where we have a specific region where, because of conservativeness and the culture, girl does not have access to education. In fact, there is around 250,000 girls in that region, and there was a 0 enrollment for girl for the last 30 years. So we want to use the e-learning where the community itself to be trained as a facilitator, and can they work with their own girls to provide them with this access to education through the tablets. We also, from day one, we know, like as any project, it have a cycle, it will finish in 3 years, but we want the project to sustain beyond the UNICEF and the partner intervention. So we want to look at day one of the sustainability factor. We want to look at it from, can we develop an economy around the e-tablet? The e-tablet will be run through a solar energy in the country. Can this be used for economical income? Can be the solar energy used to charge phone, to grow vegetable farming because we could get them access to water, train the young communities, young unemployment in the society, and then they can fix the tablet. So this is a lot of ideas we're thinking in the sustainability, and we want to include it in day one. And also working with technology partner, because our hope by the end of the project, we will be able to provide very affordable, cheap tablet and solar energy for the government and also for the community, and train the communities and the youth and adolescents to be the custodians of this tablet and fix it. It's a very exciting project for us as a UNICEF. Is a new piloting program. Our door is open to all the partners who can be part of this journey. I really think the e-learning as a method in Sudan could support access to the most vulnerable children and support us to address the issue of out of school, which is significant in the country. And our door are all welcome to partner to be part of the journey with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tilal. And as we've seen, it's a very different approach in Sudan than we see in Lebanon, and I think that they make nice comparisons. I just want to move quickly now, before we move to questions, on just reflecting on some of the lessons learned over the past years. Like any journey to scale, it's a long one, and I do see that there are questions about how do you know that you're good enough to scale? When do you have the evidence to scale? And we've built a we've made a large investment in research where we do measure the learning effects, but also the well-being effects on children of access to education in this manner, which we'll be able to talk a little bit about in the question time. I think if I look back on when we're successful, it's when we really can develop good, strong partnerships with the ministries. As those on the call who know us well, that hasn't always been easy, and it has meant in sometimes even up to a year delay as we develop those relationships. But we think they're extremely important, and to always keep true to curriculum. Children and their caregivers are really looking for curriculum-based programming, because that gives them hope for the future and what they see as a ticket to a new life. We've also seen that culture is extremely important. We've made some mistakes. You have to be very careful not to show going from one region to another and showing items and content that's not culturally applicable or accepted in one region which comes from another is an absolute no-no. It seems, of course, a no-brainer if I say it now, but we certainly made that mistake. The other thing that we've really learned is that developing content in Arabic, particularly for reading, is really challenging. There's just not a lot of good content available, and we ended up making a lot more ourselves and going through all the quality and control aspects of doing that than we ever thought that they would at the start. So if anyone's ever looking for Creative Commons allowed Arabic content, you know where to find it, because we certainly have it now. We do believe it's worth it, and I think when Talal came and saw us in Amsterdam once and saw our team of Syrian, Iraqi and other refugees working on Arabic content, that he really said, hey, this is something that even in traditional schools is not available in Sudan. Oh, sorry, I've jumped. One other aspect I think that's very important is we've always prided ourselves on being an education program first and foremost. What we're finding now is when we look to scale is that we're really having to develop and increase our capacity in technology. Now, War Child is never going to be a technology company, but our partnerships and making the right choices about technology are becoming more and more important. For those of you who know these kind of terms, mobile device management, all sorts of crazy terms I never thought that I would learn are all coming into my vocabulary now, and I think that's very important for us to be able to share that with the sector, as it's a challenge, a nice challenge, but it's a challenge. The other thing that I think has been quite challenging for us is to have Can't Wait to Learn understood as an education solution and not just a game. Just like any other education program, and Mona highlighted that, we have all the challenges on the supply and demand side as everybody else. Technology is not the golden bullet. It can help to improve your education programming in some circumstances, but first and foremost, you have to keep education at the forefront. And the other thing for us at War Child, and I think also for UNICEF and also for Symbola and all our partners, children's needs must always be at the forefront, which is why we work with children to develop the game narrative. While we look and hear what they need, we try and develop delivery models that fit. That makes us probably, sometimes I think we have too many aspects to deal with within our program, but we do believe it's important to take all of these into account. We don't think we know all the answers, but we think we're slowly getting towards having a little bit of a bank of knowledge, which we hope will be useful for us and for others in the sector, but also will help ensure that we actually offer quality education to children affected by conflict. Layla asked us to have a call for action at the end, and we certainly do have a call for action. We're a partner-driven program. We're always extremely interested in new partnerships. Specific partnerships at the moment is looking for research institutes who are very strong on testing protocols. We're looking for, and I mentioned the word, people with expertise in mobile device management, in system architecture. We're also really looking to work with other education emergencies actors. We're just about to launch a program with NRC, Save the Children, and Save the Children in Uganda, hopefully also with the ministry, and we always welcome bringing the expertise of our own sector on board. I think Layla will want to open the floor for questions now, so thank you all for listening so attentively.
Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you, Nisreen, Masa, and Talal for this excellent overview of the Can't Wait to Learn program. As you heard, well, first of all, what Can't Wait to Learn program is doing is really very much aligned with the two focus areas for the NLG Tech Task Force. One is around innovative solutions like game-based learning that's addressing challenges around, as Masa and Talal talked about, around quality, engagement, access, scale, accreditation, or even just real-time feedback on how children are progressing and learning. And then implementation is being done through partnerships, and you saw and heard about two examples of partnerships, one with a local NGO, that's Sambola, and one with a UN agency, that's UNICEF. So we have a number of questions. I think the first question that I'll start with, and this is not in a chronological order, but I think it helps set the context for and bring back the conversation to specifically what's at the core of the programming, which is the game-based learning. Kate, if you could just say a little bit about how games are being developed, what is the process for developing, who's developing them, and how are you deciding what's kind of the next game in your pipeline? Kate, are you able to hear me? I think you might be on mute. All right. I think we'll move. Oh, I think I can hear you.
Go ahead, Kate. You should be off mute now.
She seems to be talking, but we're actually not hearing her right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So Kate, if you hear us, if you could dial back in, as there are a number of questions that I think you'll probably want to comment on. So let me see, as Kate is dialing back in, what would be a good question? Paul has had a number of questions. Paul Frisoli from the IRC. Thank you, Paul. Let's start with one of Paul's questions around using these games outside of the classroom, and also what types of analytics can be collected on use outside of classroom, if this is something that Nisreen, Masa, or Talal can comment on.
Hi, Kate cannot. She's texting me on Skype. She can't hear you, Laila. So I'll answer some of Paul's questions. Basically, the game, yes, in Lebanon, for example, it's being used in community centers, and it's part of non-formal education. The game also collects the management portal that Kate mentioned. It collects data on how the child is progressing through the game, what levels he or she is going through, what mistakes they're doing, where they are stuck. And all of that data goes to the management portal where we can track attendance and their progress. What other question was there?
The question around the game development. So what is the process
Yes.
Who's developing the games, if you can speak to
Yes.
that?
So in each country, we go through a co-creation process where we collect data from the children, what would the game world they would like to see. For example, in Lebanon and in every country we've done that. We go to the field, we ask the children what storylines they want to see, what characters, what colors, what would the game would look like. In Lebanon, it's based on the professions, so you'll see a doctor, you'll see a nurse, you'll see a teacher, a mechanic, a construction worker, and there's a lot of greenery and water because that's what the children wanted. So that's how Butterfly works. It's an innovation studio, helped us collect that data. We take that data and we give it to local artists in every country, and they'll help us sketch characters in the game world. And then these are given to software developers, and the game was developed in Holland, in the Netherlands, through a company called Flavor, and that's how the game is developed. And then pictures and images of the game are sent back to the field, to the country offices for feedback, for cultural appropriateness, and it's a back and forth process of development.
Yeah, and actually related to that, just building on that to understand how then the game or is the code open source code so that it could be adapted to other contexts, and this is something that Paul is asking about, similar to the Edu app for Syria. And then also what plans are in the pipeline for the kind of broadening the use of, as he said, these amazing reading and math games.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll jump in on that one. What we're looking at as far as open source is that what we do is we develop games which are linked to the whole of the curriculum. So the game itself, so if we look at Lebanon Maths 1, 2, 3, that represents the whole of the curriculum for Lebanon, and that we do in conjunction with the ministry. That means that whole game, the ministries often are quite sensitive about how and who it's used, and we generally come to an agreement with them where as many partners as possible can use them in that context. What we are going to be doing and that we're working towards, and I think this will be interesting particularly for Paul, is to make specific and very useful components of the game open source. For example, we've developed a mini game engine, which is an easy way to create all the mini games that are used within the game that Nisreen told you about, and that will be open source. Also, as I said before, a lot of the content that we've made, we've ended up having to make a lot ourselves, which means that we're in the very fortunate position of being able to share it with others under Creative Commons license. So I think that's also another way that we'll be able to do that. Thirdly, in terms of sharing and increasing access, is also bringing as many partners on board as possible. And we often have sessions where we'll have our partners come over to Amsterdam, for example, and come and meet all the technical team and go through everything. So it's a little bit of a combination which allows us to meet the needs of the host country ministry, but also to provide the open source code that is useful for others. Because I think there's also an idea that if it's open source, it means it's easy to use and replicate. That's not the case. We're looking to provide open source code that is useful.
That's super helpful. So you're emphasizing both co-creation as well as broader distribution and usage and adaptation by others.
Exactly.
Coming back to the data, there are a number of questions about analytics and data. So let me just go through a couple of them so you can address them in bulk. What types of analytics can be collected on use outside of classroom while also maintaining at the same time privacy and security of learners? Then how are you specifically measuring these learning outcomes and how do you track them? And then I would just add the third one, which is do students have a profile of their learning?
Okay, sure. The first question, when you say use outside the classroom, I'm assuming that you're meaning informal, the informal sector, and in the case of Lebanon and Sudan, we're working in the informal. In Jordan, we're working in the formal and informal class. What the analytics that come off the game themselves is that each child has their own code. We measure how long a child has worked in a specific session, also how long it's taken them to finish a game, how many mistakes they've made, etc. And that's all uploaded into a portal. The other way that we collect data about how children are learning is we have baselines, in sometimes midlines and then endlines, and they're tests which we specifically develop, which are based on curriculum, and then tested across countries. And in addition, in some countries, we also are looking to do either an early grade reading assessment or an early grade maths assessment by an external evaluator, also to validate some of our findings, but also to correlate. Because what we hope eventually is that by looking at the log data itself, which I talked to you about, and seeing how that correlates with the more evaluative or research work that we're doing to measure learning outcomes, if there is a good correlation, we can pretty much then eventually say with some surety that if a child has got through 75% of a game, then they'll have, for example, 60% competency level against the curriculum learning objectives. Now, that's obviously the end game, but that's where we're trying to work towards. In terms of a learning profile, I assume by that you mean, Layla, that can the children access information about how they're learning? They don't have access to the management portal. The facilitators have access to the management portal so they can see the progress of the child. But what the child does experience is they see a very concrete way in which they're rewarded for learning, and that's in the overworld that Nisreen showed you. There's lots of ways by doing the mini games that children actually collect points, which means that in the case of Sudan, professions are grown. In the case of Lebanon, buildings get larger and larger, and you build another world. So although they can't see, oh, I've played X number of mini games, they can actually understand their learning progress through seeing the progress of the game themselves and seeing the game unfold. And so it's quite a nice intrinsic motivation.
Great. We're kind of running out of time with a number of questions that are available. Just one thing for everybody attending and sharing great questions. You're welcome to also follow up after the webinar with the speakers. Frederick, did you want to pick any of the questions out of the chat window and ask?
Yeah, since we're running short on time, there was a question that was it's quite simple and probably quick to ask, and that was hardware platforms and a little bit of infrastructure. On the pictures, we saw a bunch of different types of devices. So the question is, what type of devices are these games available on? Is it any web-capable device? And how do you, in these environments, how do you deal with things like power and the infrastructure that needs to be supported for the devices to work?
Okay, it does vary across contexts. We use Android tablets in terms of the hardware. They're fairly simple off-the-shelf tablets. That said, we do some small modifications to the tablets to ensure security, to block some access to, for example, internet, etc., for children from a child safeguarding perspective. In the case of Sudan, as Tilal talked about and showed you, we actually have introduced solar to provide the infrastructure in terms of electricity. In Lebanon and Jordan, there's electricity available. More and more, we're looking at how that builds over, as we scale up, and looking at finding the right tablet suppliers, the right software suppliers who are able to provide that end-to-end solution for us, etc. In terms of, at the moment, we're largely an offline solution. So the games are actually loaded on the tablet themselves, and then we come and either through Wi-Fi, usually through Wi-Fi, in fact also in Sudan through Wi-Fi now, we milk the tablet, as you were, for the log data. We're also hoping with time, and we're currently developing a small piece of code to do that, is we should also be able to send updates electronically as well, but they're rather large applications, so that might take a little longer. The other thing that we're looking at as well, and I think this tells you a little bit about how we focused on learning first, and we're building the technology infrastructure now around it as we start to scale, is we're also looking at charging solutions as well. And in all countries in this phase, we'll actually have a charging solution. It's relatively expensive charging solution, so we're also looking at how we can make that more cost-effective over time.
Okay, thank you
so
much.
Doesn't answer all the questions, but it gives you a little peek.
In fact, what I would suggest, is given that we're already over time, is for those of you who have questions that haven't been answered during the Q&A portion, please do follow up with the speakers. I'd like to thank the speakers, so Kate, Nisreen, Masa, and Tilal for joining us today and for sharing the work that they're doing in game-based learning and also the partnerships that they're developing. As Kate mentioned, there are a number of opportunities for all of you on the call and those of you who will be listening to the recording to partner with Can't Wait to Learn and reach out to Kate if you are interested. We will be sharing the recording, which you can forward broadly to and share them broadly with your communities. Thanks again to the speakers and all of you for joining us for the last NLG Tech Task Force webinar of 2017. Looking forward to reconnecting in 2018.
Thank you very much, Leila, for producing this series, and we will let this webinar stay open for a little bit so you can answer the webinar satisfaction poll that you'll find that link in the chat window as well. Have a nice rest of your day, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.